Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolong Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolong is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
Oh, hey there. You like true crime stories, right? Yeah, I know, who doesn't? But I gotta admit, after a while, all those stories of murder and heartache, well, they tend to go straight to my hips. So that's why I, Leroy Luna, have created a podcast called Excuse Me, That's Illegal, where we'll take a hardcore look at some softcore crimes. No TED Talks on Bundy here. The letters BTK won't be coming from these lips. Unless he had a brother that used to steal library books. Suppose I'd be willing to go balls deep into that one if that were the case. Anyways, you'll hear stories such as the Mad Pooper, a female jogger who wreaked havoc in a Colorado Springs neighborhood, using one family's front yard as her own personal dumping grounds. If this kind of content sounds like it's up your alley, Excuse Me, That's Illegal is available right now on all your favorite podcatchers. So come join me. I'll be right here waiting for you.
I'm Brett,
And I'm Alice.
and we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, they call them square groupers, and they are the most valuable catch a fisherman can pull into his boat. But catch one, and you just might find yourself murdered. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my effervescent co-host, Alice.
Thank you, Brett. Is this as we're
You're welcome.
entering a different holiday season?
We are entering a different holiday season. That was Chuck's suggestion. He thinks you're bubbly, apparently.
Oh, Chuck, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, now I can be more bubbly that we have all the horrors of October behind us.
I know, it makes me sad to say, but as I was telling Alice, we're recording this in the middle of October, so there's still some October to go. But it makes me sad that we're recording regular, old-fashioned, boring true crime and not horrific, Halloween-inspired true crime. But
You know what I realized today, though? That apparently my fear of all things horror is hereditary, because my son came downstairs this morning for breakfast and he said, I'm terrified of jack-o'-lanterns. And I said, oh, what's so scary about jack-o'-lanterns? He's like, they have faces. And I said, all right. And now he's
it
like,
is a pumpkin with a face.
he's terrified, like terrified. So I had to remove all the pumpkins in our house.
Oh. Does he know we're going pumpkin purchasing
Or
on Saturday?
He does not. He's not excited about the pumpkin patch, if that's what you're asking.
Oh.
He is not excited.
Well, Uncle Brett will just have to take him under his wing, teach him the ways. Halloween.
He likes you so far, but if you start terrorizing
maybe the
him,
end of that. I'm going to show up with a jack-o'-lantern on my head.
oh my gosh, he will legitimately run screaming from you. Please do that. That will actually be really funny.
Maybe I will. But I won't have one because we wouldn't have gone to the pumpkin patch yet. So we'll see what we can figure out. Anyway, all you guys, y'all are done with Halloween. You're wondering why we're talking about Halloween. We have a crazy story for you today. One that has a lot of really interesting aspects to it, and also has some good trial stuff in it. So we'll be able to talk about that, and I think you guys will learn a lot. And so we're excited to share it with you. And I guess we've talked enough. We should go ahead and dive in. Key Largo, Florida is where we're going. And any of you who've ever been to the Florida Keys know that it's a paradise. I had an oral argument in Miami once, and I took the opportunity. It was on a Thursday, so of course I took the rest of the week off, rented a convertible, and drove to the end of the Keys. It was amazing. If you've never done it, I suggest it. And the Keys are beautiful. They're a paradise. They're perfect. Nothing bad ever happens in the Keys. And if you ever spend any time in the Florida Keys, it's a beach lover and boater's dream. And it's not the kind of place that often sees brutal murders. But on October 16th, 2015, residents of the Keys would awaken to news of an execution-style homicide, the consequences of which are reverberating to this day, and all because of some square grouper. Now, in the world of commercial fishing, the bluefin tuna is generally regarded as the most valuable fish in the sea. The tuna regularly go for $200 a pound, with the finest specimen ever caught, a 600-pound monster, selling for $3 million at the Tsukiji Japanese fish market in Tokyo. A whopping $5,000 a pound. That must have been some incredible tuna. I would love to have some of that. But the finest square grouper dwarfs that, selling for $25,000 a pound or more. And that's because square grouper isn't a fish. It's cocaine.
The mass importation of an illegal substance leads to some strange occurrences. Hundreds of tons of cocaine worth billions of dollars enter the United States every year. But because it is highly illegal, you can't just ship it over in a cargo ship or mail it through UPS, although some people try. But
People do that.
People do that, by the way, but they're often caught because of drug-sniffing dogs and suspicious packaging. And so you might be a little confused right now because we were just talking about tuna fish, and all of a sudden we've changed to talking about cocaine. So why is that? It's because smugglers have improvised in how they can get illegal substances into the United States. They've sent cocaine through underground tunnels, disguised as consumer goods or hidden in everything from pottery to toys, and even had people swallow packages of cocaine and bring it into the country that way. But given the extensive coastline of the United States, bringing in cocaine by sea has always been an attractive option. Whether by speedboat, fishing boat, or even submarine, the Coast Guard estimates that it intercepts only about a quarter of the cocaine that smugglers attempt to bring in by sea. But when they do intercept it, they don't always get their hands on the cocaine itself. The smugglers aren't stupid. Getting found with a whole lot of cocaine is not a good idea. So what do? They often dump it before they are caught. And because the packages are tightly wrapped and waterproof, they don't sink. They float. This leads to a stunning amount of cocaine just floating up on beaches or getting hooked by unsuspecting fishermen. Hundreds of pounds a year, in fact, leading to a nickname for the finds, square grouper. And that brings us to our story.
Now, Alice, have you ever seen The Legend of Cocaine Island?
I have not. Have you, Brett?
Well, I highly recommend that you and everyone who's listening to this podcast, if you get the opportunity to listen to or to watch The Legend of Cocaine Island on Netflix. You absolutely should. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen.
Oh, wait. No, let me change my answer. I've absolutely watched it. I didn't know that's what it was called because it was so riveting. I think you told me to watch it, and I stayed up all night to watch it one night, and it was insane. Oh, it's incredible.
I am definitely what's the word I'm looking for? An evangelist. I'm an evangelist. Yes.
Oh.
Thank you, Alice. An evangelist for Cocaine Island. It is incredible.
This is worth evangelizing about because I remember you mentioned it to me and I was like, that premise is incredible. I have to watch it. So I stayed up till like 3 a.m. that night to watch it, and it will not disappoint y'all.
And basically, it's about what we're talking about. It's about somebody who finds one of these packages of cocaine and then he buries it because he doesn't like the police. He doesn't want to tell the police. So he buries it. And then years later, he's sitting around a campfire with this guy in Florida smoking marijuana, and he tells this story about burying millions of dollars worth of cocaine on this island. And so this guy, who's never done anything illegal in his life other than smoke marijuana, decides he's going to go find this cocaine. And that's what's called The Legend of Cocaine Island. And the documentary is so well done, and it's crazy. And absolutely, if you have Netflix and you haven't seen it, go check it out. You will love it. And The Legend of Cocaine Island has a happier ending than the case we are going to talk about today. And that brings us to Carlos Ortiz. Now, Carlos was the kind of friendly, jovial guy who makes the perfect barber. You know, the kind of guy you want to go to his barbershop and sit down and, you know, he's cutting your hair and you're talking about everything, and it's the kind of place you want to come back to and you never want to leave. And he was working on being the perfect tattoo artist. Being a barber, being a tattoo artist, sort of working with people, kind of have a lot in common. And he wanted to do both. And in 2015, things were going his way. Now, he had struggled with drug abuse, and he had a lengthy criminal rap sheet, but he was trying to leave that life behind. He was building this new business. He had this barbershop going. He wanted to add in the tattoo parlor and really sort of start his life over. And it wasn't just his professional life that he was working on. He also had a new relationship that he was working on with a woman named Tara Rosado. Tara was recently divorced and she had 3 kids, 8-year-old Noah, 4-year-old Martha, and 3-year-old Michael. And you could imagine that might, it might keep a young single guy from wanting to necessarily get involved in a relationship with her, but that wasn't the way Carlos looked at it. None of that dissuaded him. He was head over heels with Tara, and he loved her kids too, and soon he and Tara had moved in together. They even had a new pit bull puppy. Everything was coming together. Everything was going their way, but that all came crashing down when a local fisherman named Jeremy McCauley reeled in a square grouper.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
So let's talk about the timeline in this case. So it's June 2015, and that's when Jeremy McCauley, who was a fisherman on a boat called the Seahorse, is out on a routine fishing trip. Those of you who've been to the Keys, if you've ever spent any time on the water, this is something people do. You got some guys who got a boat, they got some people they've hired to kind of work as a hand, and then there's all these tourists coming in and out who are renting the boats out, going out on charters, going fishing, and that's a great way to make money in these kind of places. And I have friends who do this, and they love it because they love the water and they love fishing, and it's an opportunity to do what you love and make money at the same time. And during this trip, McCauley hooks a package of cocaine, and he manages to do it in such a way that it seems like nobody noticed but him. So he found this, he brought it in, the captain of the boat didn't notice, none of the people who were on the boat noticed, but this cocaine was worth at least $500,000 and probably more. Now, McCauley is then faced with a choice. Like most illegal catches, whether it's a square grouper or
some tropical endangered fish.
A tropical endangered fish. There you go. Anything that you bring in that you're not supposed to have, you can always just throw it back and ignore it and act like you never saw it. Or, you could call the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard come in, and they will take care of it for you. They are always more than happy to meet you and pick up any cocaine you find floating around in the water. Those of you who are watching this on YouTube or looking on the website will see a picture of a couple young girls who have a massive package of drugs that their parents took a picture of them holding before the Coast Guard came and took the drugs. So you can do that. You can just call the Coast Guard, and they'll take care of it, and you never have to worry about it. But you have to imagine standing there on that boat, working a hard day's work for not that much money, with $500,000 at least sitting at his feet. McCauley thought of everything he could do with that money. So he decided to choose option 3. He decided to enter the drug business.
Now, of course, McCauley was a fisherman, not a drug dealer. He was going to need help if he was going to enter this new business. So he reached out to an old friend of his who knew something about drugs, even if this friend was trying to go the straight life, and that was Carlos Ortiz. He also reached out to 2 other men who he knew had connections to the underworld, Adrian and Christian Demblins.
And we talked about this in some of our other cases, You don't just find a package of cocaine and then go sell it out on the street corner or at the local farmer's market, That's just not how it works. You got to find somebody who knows what they're doing. And McCauley, he knew Carlos and he knew the Demblane brothers. And so he's like, hey, guys, guess what I found? Let's see what we can do with this.
I don't get many of those calls as a prosecutor, Brett.
No, nobody's ever called me and asked me if I knew where to offload $500,000 worth of cocaine. So.
No, not me. So no good advice coming from us on that one. Now, Adrian and Christian were not what you'd expect. The sons of a wealthy Cuban-American family, they'd grown up with everything they'd ever wanted. Their parents were wealthy investment bankers who seemingly owned half of the Keys. The brothers were given a charter boat business by their parents and could have easily lived a life of luxury. And maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe they longed for something else. For the 2 men were getting in serious trouble and covering for each other by the time they were in high school. Christian had been caught with 2 pounds of weed in his trunk when he was just 25, and Adrian had been arrested and convicted of cocaine trafficking. Whatever the case, these men knew what they were doing, and the money started pouring in.
And it's so interesting, Alice. We see sort of both sides of this. You see people who have never had anything in their lives, and, it doesn't excuse what they're doing. It doesn't excuse their criminal behavior, But you can understand it at least. I mean, you can sort of see the dead ends, you can see the desperation, you can see the desire to do something different and new, and something that it feels like you could never accomplish just in the, in the straight world, as it were. But then you see people like this, and this is not uncommon. You got people who you just don't understand. Like, they've got everything going for them, and they don't have to do this. They don't have to live this kind of life. And yet they do. I mean, they choose that path, and these guys seem like they are 100% that. I mean, they had it all. This was not something they had to do. This was not something that, they had no choice about. I mean, they decided they were going to be drug dealers. That was the life they wanted to live. And they made that choice, and everybody knew that these guys were involved in some rough stuff. So it's not that surprising that Macaulay would reach out to them. Now, by August of 2015, friends started to notice that Macaulay's fishing business, it must have taken off. He had bought a brand new truck and enough gold jewelry to decorate a horse. Business was taking off for Ortiz, too. Apparently, the barber shop was bringing in lots of money because that tattoo shop he'd always wanted to start, he was now going to start it. And he actually went into business with Macaulay. They rented a property together, and they opened a shop called Ink Your Dreams. But by September of that year, things had taken a sharp turn. As we said earlier, Ortiz had struggled with drug addiction really for his entire adult life, and it had gotten him in a lot of trouble, but it seemed like he'd left it behind. But by September, friends of Ortiz and of Rosado began to lament that it seemed as though their friends appeared to be back on drugs, and apparently the easy access to free cocaine was just too much for Ortiz to turn down, and this slippery slope went really fast. And really, by October, he was in bad shape, to the extent that friends would see him and say he looked like he was on death's doorstep. And it wasn't just that he was on the drugs, and it wasn't just that his health was suffering. He had been flush with cash. He was starting this new business. Everything was going great, but suddenly he had nothing. And Ortiz began asking around if there were any quote-unquote licks he could hit. In other words, he wanted an easy robbery, maybe even of other drug dealers. Now, Carlos, he no longer slept, and one friend said he looked like he was on the edge of a breakdown.
And that's really an incredibly dangerous path to be on, stealing from other drug dealers. Those of you who've watched The Wire know this. Drug dealers often try to steal the stash of another drug dealer, but they are well armed. It's a dangerous thing. You get a reputation. People will come hunt you down because there's a lot of money on the line.
Yeah, it's a really, really good way to get killed.
Yeah, the fact that he's turning to this is a lot of desperation. Brett, before we move on, I need to talk about one of our favorite sponsors, Athena Club. Recently, I was late to court, but I needed to take a shower and shave my legs, and I had no time to replace my old, dull razor. And as a result, in my rush, I cut my leg, and it was just a terrible start to a busy day. Now, I don't have to worry about that anymore with the Athena Club's razor because it's designed with built-in skin guards to help prevent razor burn while being gentle on curves. The razor blade is surrounded by a water-activated serum with shea butter and hyaluronic acid, which is a holy grail for skin care. The best part is the razor kit's only $9 and comes with 2 blade heads, so I don't have to worry about replacing it, and a magnetic hook for shower storage. I got it in this baby blue color, and I just love all the colors you can choose from. Plus, you never have to worry about running out of refills or being stuck with dull, overused razors like I was that fateful morning, because you can choose how often replacement blades are sent to you with free shipping. That means fresh, ready-to-use razors always arrive right when you need them. Also, you have to try their Cloud Shave Foam. I haven't used shave foam in so long, but it's such a premium experience to nourish your skin while shaving. It makes shaving kind of feel like I'm at a spa. Now, show your skin you care with the Athena Club Razor Kit. Sign up today and you'll get 20% off your first order. Just go to athenaclub.com and use promo code OWLS. That's ATHENACLUB.com with promo code OWLS for 20% off. Now, on October 14th, 2015, Ortiz tells his best friend, Steele Hancock, that he has come up with a plan. He decided to extort his business partners. If they didn't give him more money and drugs, he would turn them into the police. This is not going to go well for Ortiz. Blackmailing does not work well in this business. And his friend knew this. Hancock begged Ortiz not to do this, but Ortiz was determined. It turns out he had taken a video when Macaulay hauled in the cocaine, over 30 pounds of it, with Macaulay bragging about his loot. This video, Ortiz figured, was the perfect collateral. So the next day, on October 15th, 2015, Ortiz texts Macaulay. He includes the video and demands money and more cocaine. He said if he didn't get his money, quote, shit is gonna get crazy.
No, this is all very bad. This is all very bad. And, you know, it's just a testament to where Carlos is, that he can't see what a terrible idea this is. And, I mean, it's funny because you see these things and you know how they're going to end. And sometimes it's hard to pinpoint how they begin. You know, it's hard to figure out, like, what was the point where this all went wrong? You see that we talk about in, like, the Jeffrey McDonald case. Like, what was it that led to that night being the night that Jeffrey McDonald killed his whole family? Like, what was the trigger? And it's an important thing, and people want to know that. When we talked about the Darla Routier case, and people were really interested. What was the motive? What was the trigger? What made her do what she did? In this case, obviously, you know, there's no mystery. I mean, you can see this coming a mile away. It's like Carlos is standing across some railroad tracks, just waiting to get run over. And at that point, once he sends that text, really, his fate is sealed. So at 9:20 p.m. on October 15th, Macaulay texts Ortiz that he will give him $6,800. In that text, he includes a picture of a stack of $100 bills. It turns out later there's really only one $100 bill. Everything under the other 100 is like a couple 20s or whatever. But he makes it look like he's got the money to cover this. And Ortiz, Carlos, he tells him to meet him at his house, which, as we said before, was also Tara Rosado's house. Now, Macaulay, you know, he's a fisherman, right? I mean, he brought Carlos in on this for a reason, because he didn't know what he was doing. So when faced with this situation, when somebody is blackmailing him, he doesn't just go over to Carlos's house. He calls Adrian Demblains. And according to Adrian, Macaulay asked him to come pick him up at Macaulay's house, which Adrian did. Adrian saw Macaulay load a Colt 45, which didn't bother him, as he often carried a firearm as well when taking part in drug transactions. And this is actually really common, that drug dealers are almost always armed. And so this is not surprising, and it rings true that Adrian would say that. That just wouldn't bother him that much. That of course he's going to take a gun with him. Adrian stops by one of his customers' houses, and he actually gives her $100 to borrow her vehicle. It will turn out later it wasn't just cash. He also gave her some drugs. She was one of his customers, and she was a pretty bad addict. Now, this is the first time Adrian's story might make you question what's going on here. If they're just going over to talk to Carlos, or if they're just going over to give him some money, no big deal, just giving my friend a ride, why does he go pick up somebody else's car to do that. It makes you think he doesn't want his vehicle seen at Carlos's house.
Just a pro tip, if someone who you know to be in the illegal drug business asks you to borrow your car in exchange for money, don't do it.
It's a good pro tip. I back that up.
And by the way, we see this a lot. That's not a joke. We see this almost always when someone gets pulled over with something they shouldn't have, like illegal guns, stolen guns, drugs. They're usually not in their car because they recognize that their car can be traced back to them. It is almost always, this can't be my stuff because it's someone else's car. 10:30 that night, the two men pull into Ortiz's driveway. Home security video caught the SUV arrive. One man resembling Adrian sat in the driver's seat, while another, who appeared to be McCully, walked into the house. A few minutes later, Adrian heard gunshots. Adrian jumped out of his vehicle and drew his gun, but it was McCully who emerged from the house. The two men went back into the house, and Adrian saw Ortiz and Rosado dead on the floor. Both had been shot execution style. McCully grabbed Ortiz's iPhone, and the two men got out of the house. McCully assumed that the incriminating texts were on the iPhone, but he would prove to be wrong. When the police arrived, they would find the texts on Rosado's phone, which McCully had not grabbed. Meanwhile, Rosado's children, remember, she had 3 children, were in the next room. The 3 went into their mother's room and found both their mother and Ortiz dead. While their dog wandered around tracking blood across the room, they sat on the floor crying for hours. This is just devastating. Eventually, they drew 2 tombstones on a piece of paper with crayons and wrote, "Rest in peace, Mom and Carlos." 8-year-old Noah decided they needed to find a new place to live, and he led the other girls out into the rain. A neighbor would find them walking down the road, and that's when the police were called. Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's definitely wanted to talk about this because it's sort of a, part of this you forget about it. There are more victims than just Carlos and Tara, and I mean, just awful. It's hard. In one way, it's kind of the way kids think, right? I mean,
Right.
The 8-year-old's like, well, I guess we need to find a new place to live now because, Mom's been shot and so is Carlos. And they just head off to find a new place to live. And then the parents find them. And I'm not exactly sure what ended up happening to the kids, but I think the one blessing in all of this, and we're actually going to talk about this more later, is that the kids were not harmed.
But oh gosh, to be in the house and just next door is I'm not gonna say we haven't seen that before, but there's just kind of an added layer of sadness to the case.
Yeah. And so, that's the end of Carlos, and it's the end of this adventure, but obviously it is the beginning of this crime. Now, the police obviously have some pretty good leads. They found Tara's phone, and in that phone are these texts. There's this video they find of McCully, with these drugs. So they have a pretty good idea very quickly of who they should be looking for, but it gets even better for them. As we said before, we often think of water as covering all sins. Water is this it's this great thing, right? Because you can dump all the evidence in it, or you can dump the body in it, and once it goes below the surface, it's gone forever, and you're never going to see it again. I hate walking across bridges because I'm always afraid I'm going to drop something in the water. It's like my irrational fear. I'm always like clutching my phone and my wallet because I just feel like I'm going to drop something in the water. and that's sort of the way we think about water. And so, of course, what are you going to do with the gun and the iPhone you just found? You're going to throw it in the water. And great thing, you're in the Keys, so there's all sorts of water you can throw it in. But the problem was This isn't the Mississippi River, you know? This is not like muddy, cloudy water that you can't see more than a couple inches through. The water is crystal clear. And wouldn't you know it, a fisherman, another fisherman, is out on the water, and he just so happens to look down. And there, at the bottom of the canal, through this crystal clear water, he sees a gun. And he thinks, that's weird. People don't just normally throw their guns in the water unless they're doing it for a reason. So he calls the police. The dive team shows up. They go to the bottom of that canal, and they pull up a Colt 45. And they look around, and sure enough, a few feet away from it is a white iPhone. The iPhone was Carlos's, and the gun was the weapon that had killed him. The iPhone included a text from Macaulay that he was on his way to Ortiz's house.
That's some pretty damning evidence right there. But Brett, when you say the water is crystal clear, for those of you who have not seen this water, go look at a picture of it or a video of it. It truly is crystal clear. It's gorgeous. This is why so many people flock to the Keys. But you can just see straight down and see, clear as day. And so this was not very smart on their part.
Yeah, maybe they should have buried the gun. That might have been a better approach than throwing it in the crystal clear water. And it turns out, we're going to discover later, or the police are actually going to discover later, that one of them, I think it's Adrian, actually figures out, maybe that wasn't such a good idea, and so he actually borrows some scuba gear from somebody and goes swimming around in the canal, seeing if he can find this gun, and he can't find it. So he couldn't find it, but the fisherman did.
The two thought that borrowing a car would protect their identity. It didn't work out like that. The police were able to identify the person who owned the truck. Remember what we talked about, cars being registered? And she said that Adrian and a man fitting Macaulay's description showed up at her home asking to borrow her car. When they returned, she heard one of the men scream angrily at the other, quote, "It wasn't supposed to go down like that." She'd later hear him mention a gun to Macaulay. Maybe they should have waited a little longer before having their fight.
Yeah, we don't like to give advice on how to complete your crime, though we do it all the time. But if you're going to commit a crime, maybe don't mention it in front of third parties. Maybe don't bring third parties into it at all. I mean, I get not wanting your vehicle to be seen, but borrowing a car from somebody else just means there's a witness now who can testify against you. And this lady, she's got a ton of evidence, right? Not only did they borrow the car, but she saw them both. She heard them mention a gun. She heard them say it wasn't supposed to go down like that. Now, she's not the most reliable witness in the world. Obviously, she has some drug issues, but as we've said before, you don't find your best witnesses in the church choir. So she has no reason to lie about any of this, and she's going to be a powerful witness. And the police, and you can see, this is a good investigation, right? So many times we deal with bad investigations that don't go well, but in this one, you can see the police, building brick by brick their case. They very quickly knew that Macaulay was involved. They focused on him. They focused on Adrian, but now they're building that case, and they're finding all the evidence they need to bring charges. And at this point, they've got a good case. And so it probably comes as no surprise to anybody that's listening that at this point, the police did arrest both men for murder. Macaulay was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Adrian was charged with accessory to murder. Now, Macaulay's facing the death penalty, and he's got 2, first-degree murder charges here. We've talked about aggravators before. Killing 2 people typically is an aggravator. The fact that this was also part of a drug conspiracy is only going to make it worse for him. So he's definitely facing a really difficult situation. Adrian recognizes this. He's like, I'm getting charged with accessory to murder. Adrian knows the game better than Macaulay. Now, Macaulay's in a bad position anyway because he's the shooter. But Adrian knows what he's got. He's got a lot. And so he goes to the police and he says, hey guys, why don't I just tell you everything that happened, and why don't you give me a good deal? And he wastes no time in cutting that deal and accepting a 10-year sentence in exchange for testifying against Macaulay. And we've talked about this before. This is a state charge. It's in state court. So in the federal system, they have something called truth in sentencing. So if you're convicted in federal court, whatever sentence you get, you're basically going to serve. You get 10 years, you're basically going to serve 10 years. There's a little wiggle room for some things on the end, but there's no such thing as parole, right? So it's not one of those things where in 5 years you're going to go before a parole board and tell them how sorry you were and how you've completely rehabilitated yourself and everything's fine and they should let you go. That's not the way it works in the federal system. Whatever you get, you're going to serve. But this is a state conviction. So he's getting 10 years, but he probably is going to serve maybe 5. He's going to be up for parole. He's somebody who cooperated, and that's going to go well for him. In fact, he's probably going to be paroled in his first opportunity. So even though he gets 10 years, there's really no telling how much time he'll serve, and he probably won't serve much time at all.
And this is what we talk about, Brett, when we say, the first to the table usually gets the best deal. And Adrian knows what he's doing. And that's a good deal because even with all that evidence, it's really helpful to, no one actually knows what happened in that house, right? And it's really helpful to have Adrian flip on Macaulay.
And that's a really good point, Alice. And, I think people who are outside the system or who have never been involved in the system really don't appreciate how much evidence you really do need. You see some of these wrongful conviction cases and you're kind of surprised at how little evidence there is and how that resulted in that conviction. And usually that's a pretty bad sign. I mean, if you don't have much evidence, you don't have much evidence, right? And I feel like that's a common thread through a lot of these wrongful conviction cases is there just isn't much evidence. You might have a good prosecutor. You might have a prosecutor who's really convincing and really, eloquent and can really convince the jury of anything, but you don't have a whole lot of evidence. We talk about the Temujin Kinsu case a lot, and I feel like that's what you had there. You had a prosecutor who was really good at weaving this story that involved things like Temujin's the other, and he's involved in all this weird martial arts stuff, and he's not from around here, and he's a big city guy, and he corrupted our little country girl that testified. None of that has anything to do with the murder. But on the basis of that, in spite of a lot of evidence that he wasn't even around and couldn't have committed the murder, he's still convicted. But in a good prosecution, the kind of prosecution you're seeing here, the prosecutors are making sure everything's airtight. So they've got their evidence, but it's all circumstantial, right? And we've talked about circumstantial evidence before. Circumstantial evidence is great. It's worth exactly the same as direct evidence. We've told you that 1,000 times, but no matter how many times we tell you, you'll never believe it. You will never believe us that circumstantial evidence is just as good as direct evidence. Everyone wants someone to tell them what happened. They want to know exactly what happened. And you see this again and again and again in the cases that we talked about that are really circumstantial evidence cases. So whether it's David Thorne or Scott Peterson or Jeffrey McDonald or Darlie Routier, we can lay out for you based on the circumstantial evidence exactly what happened, but nobody saw it happen. And there will always be little questions about what happened. And those questions linger in your mind and they may create doubt, and that might even be reasonable doubt. And so you might never be able to say, I feel confident in what happened because there's nobody to tell me. And that's why every prosecutor loves having someone like Adrian. It's why they're willing to give him a really great deal when it seems like they've got him dead to rights. There shouldn't be any difficulty in convicting both of these guys. Should be easy peasy, right? Just show up and, the gun and the iPhone and the text messages and the lady who let him borrow the car and the surveillance video of the car. You've got him dead to rights. But when you have the opportunity to have this witness get on the stand and say, he did it, I know he did it because I watched him walk in with the gun, I heard the gunshots, I went inside, they were dead, he did it. That's what every jury wants to hear, and it's what every prosecutor wants. So they give him this sort of sweetheart deal, but things start to get shaky almost immediately.
And here's why, because when you have two people who are charged with the murder, we have a pretty good idea who pulled the trigger. But if you were in trial with two people who were there and you don't know exactly who pulled the trigger, you just point the finger at each other and create enough doubt that it's not clear who actually did the killing. Both of you could kind of use the same defense of, I didn't know what was going to happen, it was him. And all you have to do, remember, is to create enough doubt. And that's why Adrian is such a powerful witness for the prosecution.
And it's funny because, Adrian, there's so much benefit to Adrian being first, in doing it this way. Because if the prosecution did not accept his deal, and it was like Alice said, just both of them pointing at each other is the one who did it, the jury is probably just going to say, you know what, I don't care which one of you did it. You're both guilty. Both of you are going to jail for forever. Guilty, right? That's probably what the jury's going to say. Oh, you want us to figure out which one of you drug dealing, criminals killed these people?
Drug dealing fishermen?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to worry about this. You're both guilty. Go away. Adrian, though, by turning state's evidence, doesn't have to worry about that. Even if Macaulay points the finger at him, even if he says it was that guy all along, he did it, right? He's now on the state's team. So even if Macaulay is successful, let's say Macaulay is acquitted, Adrian's already got his deal. He's got his 10 years. So he's in a really good position, and any good defense attorney obviously is going to point that out. And in the trial that's going to happen in this case, the defense attorney, it does point that out. Did you get this deal? Didn't it mean you're not going to serve much time? Don't you expect to be paroled? These are all questions he's going to ask because he's trying to tear down that credibility. He's trying to prove that he's lying. We saw this in the David Thorne case, the Murder and Alliance case, where you've got a guy who's saying, yeah, I did it. I killed the person, but that guy paid me to do it. And there's no real evidence. I mean, as we now know, there is evidence that he did, but at the time, his defense is going to say, look, there's no evidence our guy was involved. The evidence is this dude saying it. He's up on the stand saying that he got paid to do this, but there's no real evidence it happened. Well, why is he saying that? Because he doesn't want to get the death penalty. He wants to have an opportunity to get out of jail one day. So, in that case, you got a guy who admits to cutting a mother of five's throat with a knife, viciously murdering her, a guy who in any other circumstance would definitely be facing the death penalty. And yet, because he's willing to admit it, not only does he not get the death penalty, but he gets 30 years to life. And look, 30 years is a long time, but it's a lot less time than life without parole. And it's a lot better than the death penalty. And that's powerful incentive to lie. And any good defense attorney is going to say, look, he's lying to save his own life. He's not telling the truth. He's lying. Now, in this case, what you have, because this is not a murder for hire situation, you have all this corroborating evidence. You've got the gun, and you've got the text messages. And that makes the hill that the defense attorney has to climb much more difficult. Because, okay, you say that. You say that he's lying, but how do you explain this, right? And that makes it a much more difficult situation for Macaulay.
Now, Brett, before we move on, I know you know that I'm currently recording this remotely from you, which means I'm using my Raycon earbuds while we record, and it is perfect. I've never had earbuds feel so comfortable for such a long time, and the sound is perfect. That's why I'm so excited to be getting these for my loved ones for the holidays. It's never too early to start gift shopping for the holidays, especially because today you can save big on a gift they'll use every day, the Raycon wireless earbuds. With seamless Bluetooth pairing and a comfortable noise-isolating fit, you can start listening right away and keep listening for hours. The audio quality is amazing, comparable to what you get from other premium brands, except Raycon starts at half the price. The new everyday earbuds come with 3 new sound profiles to make sure everything you're listening to sounds its best, with just the right amount of bass. Raycon offers 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. There's also a built-in mic, and you can take calls on your earbuds at the press of a button. I do this on a daily basis, and it makes my conference calls so much more enjoyable. So this holiday season, get them something they can use for calls or music, for work or play, at home or on the go. Or pick up a pair for yourself. Trust me, you're going to use them every day just like I do. Go to buyraycon.com/prosecutors today to unlock exclusive deals up to 20% off your Raycon order. But hurry, this offer is available for a limited time only, and you don't want to miss it. That's buyraycon.com/prosecutors to unlock up to 20% off your Raycons. buyraycon.com/prosecutors. So the case was set to be tried by veteran prosecutor Manny Madruga, but Madruga suffered a breakdown when he learned that the newly elected state's attorney had decided to let him go. It was so bad that Madruga would take his own life tragically, and that threw the case into turmoil, particularly since the attorney that replaced Madruga had been in talks to represent McCauley, leading to a conflict of interest here. Now, the state attorney general was forced to step in and appoint a special prosecutor to handle the case.
And you might be asking yourself, well, what's the big deal? You know, prosecutor is a prosecutor is a prosecutor. And I mean, that's true to a certain extent, right? But think about this. Think about how well Manny Madruga probably knew this case. He probably knew it backwards and forwards. He was getting ready to try it. He'd read every piece of paper. He talked to every witness. And he knew those witnesses. He had developed a rapport with those witnesses. He was comfortable with them. They were comfortable with him. He knew the police officers. He knew which ones were really good at their jobs and which ones maybe weren't. He knew which ones he could trust completely and which ones he might, need to question a little bit more. He'd been there for the grand jury. He'd been there for the indictment. He knew everything about this case. And all of a sudden, he's gone. He's gone and he's died. And now you're having to bring somebody else in who's not from the community, who doesn't know the facts, who doesn't know the case, and they're going to come in. And every prosecutor wants to win, obviously. But Manny, there's a tomorrow for him too, right? There's the after the case for him. So he's going to be practicing in front of these judges for the rest of his career. He's going to be in that community for the rest of his career. He's going to be more constrained, maybe, in some of the things he does than somebody who you bring in for this really big, really explosive, really dramatic, really press-heavy case. They're going to come in, and this is like their all-star game, right? They're coming in, and they really want to win because they get to win and then leave. And they get to take that victory with them back to wherever they were. And I'm saying all this because you're going to see this actually becomes important. And the approach that the prosecution takes to this case becomes important. And I want you to think about, as we get into the case and into the trial some, I want you to think about the things that the prosecution decides to do. And whether or not, if Manny Madruga had tried that case, whether he would have made some of the decisions that the prosecution is going to make in this case, and I think he won't. This case probably seems very straightforward to you. You think, what are you talking about? This should be a slam dunk. Shouldn't we just move on to they were convicted and be done with it? But actually, there's much more to this case. We're going to go ahead and stop here, and we'll pick up the case next week, and we'll talk about how this case became, this very simple, straightforward case became really complicated, really fast. And it's going to bring in all sorts of things that you see sometimes, but you're going to see them all in one case. We're going to have an informant in this case. We're going to have a jailhouse informant in this case, which we've talked about before, how problematic jailhouse informants are. But this guy is different from really every other jailhouse informant I've ever seen. He is completely different, and it's really interesting, and it makes you wonder whether or not maybe you can trust him. We're also going to talk about hearsay. We're going to talk about hearsay a lot. You guys are going to learn a lot about hearsay in the next in the next episode. So this is going to be a nerd-heavy episode. So if you've heard of hearsay, I'm sure you have. We're going to teach you all about hearsay in the next case. We're going to have some appellate stuff that goes in a direction you probably wouldn't expect, and we're going to have some questionable prosecutorial actions, and we're going to see how those actions affected this case, both at trial and in the appeal that followed. So I personally am really excited about the second part of this story, and I hope you guys are too. As always, you guys know how to get in touch with us. prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the social medias. We're on Patreon. We're on Reddit. You're probably watching us, or you may be watching us on YouTube right now. Hello to all the YouTube folks. Thank you guys for telling your friends. Thank you guys for leaving all those 5-star reviews. Every day we're having people email us talking about how they're new to the show, and we know, based on the fact that we really don't have much advertising, really any advertising, that if they're new to the show, it's because somebody told them about it. So thank you so much to all of you who are out there evangelizing for our show. Alice, do you have any other thoughts about this case before we sign off for today?
No, there's just so much to come. You guys better come back, and it's going to be kind of like a mini law class.
It is going to be a little mini law class. So you guys tell us all the time that you love the legal stuff. So if that is true, you're definitely going to enjoy the next episode. Well, we're really excited about it, but we will see you back next week for class. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Awesome.
Sound bubbles. Okay.
Oh yeah, you gotta get everything rejiggered now since
I know. I hope
fancy
it
new
works
computer.
well. Hope it works well. Okay. It has literally been 15 years since I bought a computer. Is that terrible?
Wow.
Like a new one? No, 10 years. 10 years. No, longer than that. Oh, it was law school, so 13. Almost 14 years ago.
Wow, Alice.
That's
you definitely
embarrassing.
needed a new computer.
I know.
Well, thank all our patrons for your computer.
all the terrible mishaps I've had. Fantastic. I can't wait. Can't wait to hear your new audio. Hopefully it works out. Okay. You ready to rock and roll? Ready to roll and rock? It's our first post-October episode. Makes me sad. Even though we're in the middle of October, happy.
it makes me sad to record this. So. Okay, well, I'm ready. I've got your superlatives ready and everything.